Good morning to all of you. Welcome back. As I said yesterday, once again I repeat, the text is provided for you for study, reflection, and enabling other youth ministers to get into this youth ministry well, fully. And therefore, I know that the text can be a little heavy, but I think they are the foundations for our youth ministry. And therefore, it is an invitation to continually evaluate your ministry basing on these fundamental principles of youth ministry. Most often, we tend to forget that wrong foundational assumptions or premises will lead to wrong conclusions, even if the thinking and implementing process from these premises are right. If our goal is wrong, the path may be correct, but it will not lead us to the goal. In youth ministry, this is all the more true since this ministry is about youth, persons who are autopoietic, as we said yesterday. They have intelligence and they have the capacity to renew themselves constantly and consistently, and who have the capacity to think and act. Wrong or mistaken premises will make these young people objects of ministry. There are times when I asked youth minister, who is the subject of youth ministry? I am the youth ministry, subject of youth ministry, because I do youth ministry, sorry. And what are the young? Young are the objects of youth ministry? No. In youth ministry, the young are the subjects. If you do not make the young subjects to realize, because they are intelligent, they have a capability of renewing themselves. And therefore, we need to concentrate, as we said yesterday, on the young. And therefore, this morning, youth ministry is a ministry of empowering young people towards fullness of life. I know in your handbook you have at the end of it few empty pages. I think it is good to fill up that. At this moment, according to you, what is empowering? Just write down. Please write down, because I always insist what we think may not be put down in words. Take a few minutes to write down at this moment what empowering young people means. That would be your immediate spontaneous answer. In this presentation, we shall clarify the meaning and implications of this statement. But before we describe the implications, what is the definition of youth ministry? There are long definitions, complicated definitions, simple definitions. But I prefer this. Youth ministry is the name we give it to all those actions, whatever actions we do for young, by which the Christian community, so the youth ministers are not the center, the Christian community is at the center of this youth ministry, animated by the Holy Spirit, empowers the young to advance, to enable the young to advance towards fullness of life for all. That is the goal of youth ministry. Through the ever-changing concrete life situations, and thus contribute to building up in the world God's reign proclaimed and manifested by Jesus Christ. So, What is empowering the young? What is the goal of empowering? Fullness of life for all. We will talk about it. How does youth ministry promote fullness of life for all? Accompanying them, guiding them, mentoring them, any other. When you accompany, you guide, you mentor, there is always a youth minister becomes the center. But you empower the young become the center. But before describing what empowering is, what is power? Many of these things we will know, but I am only trying to recall to our mind what it means. I have picked up 3 definitions. Yokul says, power is the agent's potential at a given point in time to influence the attitudes and behavior of one or more target persons in the direction decided by the agent. Who decides the direction? The agent. That is power. Another little more elaborate. Blank's definition of power is the ability to create and maintain a dominant coalition, a superior coalition, the one or group with the most power, that articulates a vision, mobilizes resources, gets others to accomplish a plan, prevents undesirable modification of the plan, and induces most members to accept dominant coalition decisions as binding. So there is someone who has got a power and he decides what it is, and he makes sure that it is maintained, that no one interferes and changes. And a very simple one by Laswell and Kaplan, power as participating in decision making. In our youth ministry, which of these 3 we apply? What does empowering the young mean? I'm sure some of you, most of you would have written empowering means authorizing, licensing, giving power, make able, delegating, letting the other do, investing authority in someone. These are the normal definitions given in the Oxford Dictionary and other understandings. Empowerment, the prefix originates from the Latin root, which indicates that the object, that is power, is being placed upon another. That I place power upon another. Implicit is the sense that power is a product to be bestowed upon previously unpowered persons or groups. If you really are convinced that young people are autopoietic, you cannot think that they are unpowered. Autopoietic people have power. And therefore, when we say empowerment, do I think that they are unpowered? But for youth ministry with young, it is essential to have a clarity regarding the nuances of this word power if empowerment is to be fruitful. In youth ministry, do we place power upon the young? Do we bestow power upon the young? But normally, what are the roots to power? Generally, they are described as kingly power, naked power, priestly power, revolutionary power, economic power, and propaganda power. What is priestly power? Kingly power. Kingly power is hereditary and resolves conflicts by confrontation and is maintained by habit and custom. The hereditary. My father was a king, I become a king, my son will become a king. Naked power is characterized by domination, coercion, and forced compliance. If you don't cross the street where the pedestrians are supposed to cross, the police will come and take tell you that's not correct. Naked power. Priestly power is advanced by godliness, wisdom, and statesmanship. I walk down the street wearing pants and shirt. Nobody will tell me. But if I put on my clerical habit, if I walk down, everyone will say, "Good morning, Father, good morning, Father, good morning, Father." Just because I have put on the habit. That is priestly power. Revolutionary power emerges when multitude of people, united by a belief, take over the existing system and organization. And we live in a country, the Philippines, famous for the famous revolutionary power. When the people united, economic power entices action by giving away, withdrawing economic reward. If you do not do this, you will not get your allowance. You will not get your monthly salary. Power over opinion utilizes propaganda. The newspaper, TV, advertisements, etc., which through the evocation of desire, evidence, and reiteration, attempts to change an individual's opinion. I have been using a particular brand of toothpaste. Constantly I see on the TV an advertisement for another brand. Next time we go into the supermarket, the first thing that we search is normally what is advertised. That is propaganda power. What is the basis of power? Basis of power is authority, definitely. Authority indicates that power exercised because of an established position within the organization or institute. But there is another one, prestige power. Prestige basis is due to the personal characteristic of knowledge, moral character, physical attributes, and human relation skills. In youth ministry, what is the basis of power? Is it because of authority or because of the prestige or quality of the youth minister? At a certain moment, both may be needed. But what is more important is the personal characteristics of the youth minister. Power necessitates two parties or individuals, the giver and the consenter. The giver claims power and acts to exercise it. I am a youth minister, I am responsible for it, and therefore I will tell you what to do. And when the youth minister says, the young people consent, to whom power is addressed and gives consent. There are 5 varieties of consent. Conformity to custom, compliance based on partial or distorted information, indifference, and submission under threat of sanction, and finally, commitment based on informed judgment. In empowerment, do we invite our young people to give their consent? In which of these ways? Are the young people committed after receiving informed information, make a judgment, or they say we will conform, otherwise we will have other consequences. We have to comply. We will comply with the order because there are other consequences, etc. Power holders obtain consent in 4 ways: by force, finance, fiction, and allegiance. In youth ministry, which of these 4 ways do we employ? Do we use force, or do we motivate or entice them with finance? Or we say something very beautiful and then do not say it, realize it, or allegiance? Power obtained through allegiance has to be founded on balanced trust between the youth minister and the young people. It has to be based on shared understanding and a mutual plan for action. Consent is enhanced qualitatively according to one's degree of willingness, according to one's perception of its meaning, and the meaning becomes a moral basis for power. And therefore, what are the types of power? We have the reward, coercive, referent, legitimate, and expert power. Reward power and coercive power manifest that an agent has a capacity to mediate towards and punishments on the recipient, and normally as such, they promote outward compliance, acceptance to gain reward or to avoid punishment. Many of us, when we were young, our mothers have used that. You sit and study for 1 hour, you can have a video game for 1 hour. That is reward or coercive power. Referent power, wherein the receiver attempts to identify oneself with the agent and driving force. In our youth ministry, some of us have models, other youth ministers under whom I have been formed, and therefore they become a referent power. My youth minister did this and I liked it, I want to employ it. Legitimate power. Legitimate power has its basis on the recipient's perception of an agent's legitimate right to stipulate the recipient's behavior or attitudes. If you enter this youth center, youth ministry, you have to do this. Otherwise, you please stand out. Legitimate. You are allowed to say that. Expert power. Expert power is founded on the recipient's perception, that the young people's perception, that the youth minister has a special expertise of knowledge whose influence enables the receiver to accept, integrate such principles, values, and standards in one's way of life. Power is the agent's potential capacity at a given point of time to influence attitudes. This potential capacity can be derived from three: by position, where the power is analogous to authority; personal power, which is derived from expertise, friendship, loyalty, and charisma; and political power consists in one's capacity to have control over decision-making processes, ability to establish and utilize coalitions to decide ends in cooptation. We know that we cannot use power over the young, not even power against, because we need to use power with the young. Power over the young is pseudo power. It often leads to violence. Power against the young leads to abuse. Power with is empowerment. But let's not stop at that, because then it becomes complicated. Coercive power, it is a curse of the universe. Many times we as a nation or group, sometimes we are coerced to do certain things, and it is not good. Whereas power with is coactive. It is enrichment, advancement of every person, youth minister and the young. So when I say power with is coactive, both are enriched. Not only the young people. Most of the time in our use of power, we think that I am not enriched, I am only sharing power. Power with coactive power is not a zero sum, where one person gains the capacity to achieve his or her desires at the expense of the others. Rather, power with is developing the capacity of people to act and do together. In our youth ministry, do we use power as a coactive power together? I always say that many times in our youth ministry planning, the young people have no place. We don't even get their opinion before we plan for youth ministry, because we have decided what their goals and objectives are. Understanding these power strategies. What are the strategies used in power? Power over? Is it power through the young? Or power with the young? Or coactive power? or expert power or power created. If your description of empowerment, if you have not said that empowerment is power created, I think we need to rethink about when we say empowering the young. Power over, we know what it is. I have power to control everything. The dominant coalition is comprised of the privileged. Youth ministers are many times have this tendency of having power over because we have been appointed, we are responsible for the young. But that is not. Power through. The dominant coalition is managerial elite. Bright, creative persons skilled in organizational design and management. They draw up the plan. And many times in our congregation, there is a group called Youth Ministry Group. They plan up and they expect all the others to follow it. That is power through. Coactive power. The assumption behind power with is that all people are created equal, hold inherent human rights, and have immense latent potential that can be harnessed for the good of the society. Young people are autopoietic. Do we harness their energy? The dominant coalition of bright, creative, skilled persons seek to utilize the social relations and group dynamics within the youth ministry to help individuals fulfill the need to grow and develop as individuals and as co-workers. Of course, power against, we know, we cannot use it in youth ministry. But in youth ministry, in empowering, do we create power? What is power created? Power created strategy is the energy resources are increased because young people are convinced that they are more powerful than they thought they could be. With the young, together with the young, we can create power. This power created system assumes that the energy of capable people is likely to expand if their work is important, doable, and moral. People need an atmosphere that provides the opportunity to love and accept love. In power created, unconditional love requires persons trust each other's competence. Therefore, the need to help each other maintain it. It requires one to act in another's best interest according to person's values, even when the action seems contradictory to one's own values. It expects that the group members will support each other in times of grieving. So power can be also defined as participating in decision making. There's a formal decision making when we need to involve the young. Do we involve the young? Or even in informal decisions. Do we involve the young? The values that are shaped or enjoyed, the domain over persons who support and suffer its exercise. What are the values that I propose? What are the areas over I want to involve the young in their development? And therefore, power is also control over these 8 social values. Power itself, respect, rectitude, affection, well-being, wealth, and skill, and enlightenment. Having said about this power, let us see. I'm inviting you to rethink the understanding of empowerment in youth ministry. It is not power with, not merely power shared. In youth ministry, empowerment invites youth ministers to move away from all forms of power over the young. That's the first condition. Examine ourselves. Do I normally use my power over the young? And what do I do? Promotes the capacity to invite and facilitate participation of the young in all decision-making processes so as to move towards power with. Do I invite the young in all decision-makings? Or other areas, when I say if I call the young, they will say just the opposite of what I think, then I cannot do my ministry. This power with is to be perceived as coactive, where both the youth and the youth ministers are enriched and the promotion of every human person is kept in mind. So if I ask normally a youth minister, are you growing in your personal, spiritual life, moral life? No, I am doing youth ministry, so I have acquired. No, then if you are not youth minister, it is not a coactive power. When we do youth ministry, we need to grow. We need to be enriched. This power with becomes productive when the young perceive this power as expert power. This is a crucial point. That is, the youth minister's influence springs from their credibility. Yesterday we talked about it. If you are not credible, you cannot do youth ministry. So the expert power begins with the youth minister's credibility and changes in the opinion and attitudes of the young are due to internalization of such values. In youth ministry, do I enable the young to internalize the values that I propose to them? Power with. Power with promotes productive power. The next step, where each person goes beyond individual's responsibility. I, as a youth minister, the young as young people, go beyond. That is, being responsible for one's own work or for one's own function in the whole, to collective responsibility. Every person is responsible for functioning of the whole. There are times when we hear that, oh, that is his job in youth ministry, this is her job, this is not mine. No, then there is no power. Power is divided. And what are the tests for this productive power? The first test of productive power is the collective life. Is its nourishment of the individual. If in youth ministry, the youth minister and the young do not nourish themselves and grow, then it is not a fruitful ministry. The second test is whether the contributions of the individuals can be productively united. As youth ministers, we listen to so many things. Are we able to unite, bring them together, individuals' contributions, so they feel part of this decision making? Such a process transforms power with into power created, wherein persons trust each other, respect competence of each other, and help each other, where unconditional love becomes a supreme criteria. If you want to create power, the first and foremost, there has to be trust between the youth minister and the young. And there has to be respect for each other. The youth minister should respect the competence of the youth minister, and the youth minister needs to accept the young, their competence. And there has to be unconditional love. That is empowerment in youth ministry. Empowerment in youth ministry is power created together with the young. It is not power over, not even power with. Most of the time we have an understanding that empowerment is power with. We need to go beyond. We need to go power with, coactive power, productive power, expert power. And that creates power. Dimensions absolutely essential for empowering the young for the future are greater group efficiency, efficacy, capabilities for effective interaction with adults, advanced knowledge of dynamics of the organization, capacity to accept cultural values other than one's own, ability to critically analyze traditionally hallowed practices, and finally, aptitude to utilize educative experiences beyond a specified environment or situation. These are indicators which you need to take it up later for greater study. Therefore, empowerment is not about conferring power. Power is not something divided, transferred, or conferred, or shared. It is generated. In youth ministry, power is generated together with the young by a method of organization. Empowerment can best be furthered not by dividing power, but by creating more of it. The aim should not be to equalize or balance power, but to build up the total. And therefore, empowerment, which is enablement, requires three things essentially. Ensuring that young have the means, knowledge, and opportunities to do and to be. Do we provide them this knowledge, this opportunity, the means, so that together we can create power? Secondly, do we foster the young to be protagonists, subjects of youth ministry on their daily life? And thirdly, do we nurture the intellectual conversion, moral conversion, and religious conversion? When you fully empower people, your paradigm of yourself changes. You become a servant. And ultimately, that is what the Lord invited all of us. And here I just digressing. Many times we use the word servant leadership. Kindly remember that whenever you use the word leadership, there is power. Jesus did not use the word servant leadership. Jesus said simply servantship. You become a servant. You no longer control others. They control themselves. You become a source of help to them. And what are the conditions for empowerment? First, win-win agreement. The ultimate goal of youth ministry is fullness of life for all. We will talk about it a little later. It's a win-win condition that engages youth minister, the young, and everyone in the society to seek the same goal. Demands clear and mutual understanding, commitment regarding expectations in 5 areas. To specify the desired long-term and short-term results. Do we specify with the young? To communicate the principles and guidelines. To identify various available resources. To promote responsibility rather than define accountability. There's a difference between accountability and responsibility. Accountability is fulfilling what the other has required me to do. Responsibility is going beyond that and emphasize the consequences of this. The second one is self-supervision, both on the part of the youth minister and on the part of the young. Self-supervision or self-management is the practical process in which youth ministry promotes in the young the capacity to map out the plan, execute, and control their own growth process within the framework of fullness of life for all. Do we enable the young to make their own decision, their own plan? Such a process sponsors effective autonomy by providing young the primary elements of empowerment: knowledge, skill, desire, opportunity for personal growth, as well as collective growth within a group. A third condition is helpful structures and systems. Youth ministry also needs to ensure helpful systems and structures, ethos, environment, milieu, that sponsor fullness of life for all. Such a process requires a milieu in which both the systems, that is the organizational framework, the structure, and the role definitions, facilitate, not impede the growth process of the young. A compensation system that rewards competition among the young cannot nurture a goal of fullness of life. In youth ministry, many times we have this tendency of having competitions. If you really analyze seriously, at the end of every competition, there is a group of people who have lost their interest. And similarly, a communication system that puts roadblocks in a way of personal accountability limits effectiveness. And the fourth one is self-evaluation. Does not mean control. Instead, it ensures that all processes are answerable to one another and ought to be aligned in such a manner to ensure progress of all to its ultimate goal. And finally, character and skill. We know this. Character is what the person is, and skills are what a person can do. True empowerment demands that these 6 conditions be understood as mutually interdependent and that there prevails among these conditions a proper balance. Change in one condition will automatically affect the other 5 conditions. Hence, in youth ministry, empowering involves enabling the young to grow to and progress towards fullness of life for all by providing them with principles and guidelines that foster true character, integrity, maturity, abundance mentality, etc., and by providing them proper skills, communication, planning, organization, and synergetic problem solving through a process of self-supervision and personal accountability within helpful structures, etc. So empowering is not power with, but it's more than power with, power created. Take a few minutes to think, to reflect whether in our ministry do we do this? What is the type of power we exercise? Is it power with, or power over, or power created? There may be coactive power. Yes, we work with the young, coactive. But is it producing creative power, wherein both are enriched? That is a fundamental question that we need to ask if we think about empowering. Okay, let's move on to the second area of fullness of life. Please use your last pages and try to answer these 3 questions. Combine these 2 words with a verb. Community and mission, 2 words. Whether it is you use community as a subject, mission as an object, or whether you use mission as a subject and mission as community as an object, with a verb. The next exercise is form a sentence with these 4 words or phrases: community, proclamation, mission, and reign of God. In any order that you want. Form a sentence wherein these 4 phrases are used. And the third one is a statement: community has a mission, true or false. Let's start with the last one. Community has a mission. I don't want to ask you to raise your hands or anything because it's a personal conviction and therefore you reflect on it. It is false. The community does not have a mission. The mission has a community. Mission as a community, and the 4 words are: the mission of proclaiming the reign of God has been entrusted to the community. Unfortunately, we put the words in the wrong. The church has a mission, the community has a mission of proclaiming. The community has a mission of proclaiming. Then tomorrow if the community decides the reign of God is this, everything changes. We are not following Christ. The mission that Jesus Christ entrusted to the apostles of proclaiming the reign of God has been entrusted to the community. This is the right premise to start with. If you start with the wrong premise, community has a mission, then everything changes. And another question, what is the goal of youth ministry according to you? Yeah, now you would say, because you have been hearing this word fullness of life continuously, spontaneously. Can the goal of the youth ministry differ from the goal of the church? Yes, no? Okay. The ultimate goal of every ministry, whether you do a youth ministry, social ministry, educative ministry, or health ministry, migrant ministry, whatever ministry, ultimate aim of goal of every ministry is towards fullness of life for all. To enable the people to move towards the fullness. And we know that fullness cannot be achieved here on earth. So, the ultimate goal of all ministry is that. So, youth ministry cannot differ from that church, otherwise it will not be a ministry of the church. And therefore, in youth ministry also we are called to rethink about the goal of youth ministry. And suppose you know the meaning of goal. Goal is the one that guides us. It's the end result, our ideas. It's a long-term planning and comparatively difficult, abstract and generic. Fullness of life for all is the goal. It's the end that we are striving to arrive. What should youth ministry offer to the young? The goal normally begins with a desire to liberate oneself from all that enslaves a person, be it in the economic, social, political, moral, and spiritual life. But liberation, or integral liberation, here tends to emphasize only one aspect and normally denotes a negative perspective of liberation from. There are others who will prefer the term wholeness. Others prefer the term wholeness, which refers to integration, completion of what is divided, multiple or partial. Although the term is more positive, yet it tends to become a static, a structure of balance among various elements. And therefore, the more attractive term today for the young people, because they have years ahead. Many times we tend to talk to them of salvation of souls. Sorry, you are right to talk. But it doesn't resonate with the young. Whereas when you talk to them about fullness of life, yes, they are thinking about the fullness of life. Even though it too can be contrasted to emptiness and limitation, evokes images that are more attractive, assumes greater significance and meaning in a multi-faith and multicultural context. Youth ministry with other people of other faith, we can use the word fullness. If you begin to use the word salvation, redemption, they will think whereas it is possible. To a considerable section of every population, fullness, the ultimate reality, is a symbol of ultimate mystery. The multiplicity and variety of creation is seen not as division or fragmentation, but richness rooted in the unity that is fullness. It is a mystery of God in all things and all things in God. It is fullness that is inclusive and transcendent. Fullness denotes not merely life, but abundance of it in its newness, continuity, creativity. It becomes a symbol of unity and sharing. The entire creation revelation is the story of God's desire to share the fullness of life with human beings. An invitation to human beings to participate in this fullness. The entire Genesis, first chapter 1 to 3. How God created a human being in His image. That is fullness. And how that image was destroyed. The Old Testament narrates the story of a people who, despite their long story of repeated betrayal and unfaithfulness, sought liberation and fullness of life, symbolized in the human way in this their quest for a land of their own. And the people of Israel, they sought a land of their own. They thought that they will have a fullness of life. At the appointed time, God sent His only Son, Jesus Christ. In Jesus of Nazareth, we have seen His glory, the glory of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. He gave us a new commandment, a commandment of love. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. He also established a new community that is open and inclusive, a community of freedom, fellowship, justice to proclaim the good news of the reign of God. Jesus' own teachings, cures, and miracles are signs and symbols of His desire to offer fullness of life. He says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10:10. By His suffering, death, and resurrection, Jesus overcame death, sin, and offered humankind once more the possibility of sharing in the fullness of life. The incarnational approach. The mission of Jesus Christ here on earth is fundamentally grounded in the everlasting relationship of love in the Trinity. The incarnational theology enables one to comprehend the power and presence of Jesus as a permanent part of human life. The ultimate purpose of Jesus' earthly mission is to proclaim and manifest God's reign here on earth. Motivated by God's will to save everyone through His definite intervention, and thus lead all persons to partake in the fullness of communion between Him and the Father in the spirit of love, Jesus inaugurated the reign of God. Jesus manifested this reign of God through a love that liberates, heals, and renews. The process of liberation highlights a situation of negative oppressive factors of unfreedom of various limitations and restraints. Healing denotes the restoration of the original state of self. Renewal invites the individual to deal with the scars caused by the hurts, the damage left behind by the hurt. Jesus, by liberating, healing, and renewing, invites the individuals to enter into personal relationship. Entering into personal relationship requires setting aside of fear of rejection, fear of pain, fear of failure, fear of death. While Jesus proclaimed the kingdom of God through a love that liberates, heals, and renews, Jesus also leads one to grow towards a fullness of life. I came that they may have life abundantly from His fullness, for in Him all fullness was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile all things. So the Catholic Church offers fullness of life. That is what Jesus told us. To proclaim the fullness of life by proclaiming, witnessing to the reign of God. Now, this is a long question, theological question, students of theology. What is this witness, reign of God? There are hundreds of books written on the reign of God. But they will take one aspect of the reign of God and develop, enrich it. So, if you say the goal is towards fullness of life for all by proclaiming and witnessing to the reign of God, what are the consensus that emerges? The reign of God is a symbol of active presence and sovereignty of God over all creation, history, heaven, earth, and now and always. It evokes both God's intention for and God's activity in history. It symbolizes God's intention of peace, justice, love, freedom, wholeness, fullness of life. It symbolizes that God is active in partnership with human agency to effect this universal intention. Active partnership with human agency. The reign of God and first and always a gift that comes by the grace and power of God. God has called humankind into a covenant that requires to live towards a realization of God's reign. What God wills for us, fullness of life for all, is God's will for us, the rule by which we are responsible to live. The reign of God is both gift and responsibility. And you can read up the rest of it, because thus, the reign of God in Jesus becomes a symbol of both hope and command, promise, and responsibility. And at the personal level, the reign of God in Jesus Christ is realized in authentic love and care for self, which is marked by inner peace, realization of one's dignity, worth, recognition, development of one's gift, by a sense of hope, joy in life, and satisfying of what one needs physically, socially, aesthetically. In youth ministry, if the youth minister does not care for the personal level, keeping in mind the values of the reign of God, he cannot really fulfill the mission. This personal level will lead to interpersonal level. Such a reign of God in Jesus demands of individuals lifelong conversion, of deepening relationship with God, of turning towards one's neighbor with all that love requires, justice, peace, respect, etc. And the third area is a social-political realm. The realm of God in Jesus means that Christians and Christian faith communities should publicly reflect its realization in their lives and ecclesial structures and participate as a public church in society that helps effect its eminently social values. What Pope Francis calls for synodality is this public witnessing, that we as a church together realize this kingdom of God. Realization of the kingdom of God is not merely entrusted only to some. God's reign in Jesus is an invitation for true partnership, which involves active participation in realizing this promise within and through human history. And therefore, the reign of God becomes a symbol of fullness of life. Jesus called us to proclaim the reign of God, and that is the symbol of fullness of life. I came that they may have life and have it. And what is the purpose of this reignocentric ministry? His ultimate goal is that all might come to fullness of life, here and hereafter for eternity. The reign of God throughout the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament is a profoundly social symbol, or perhaps more accurately, a spiritual symbol that demands social engagement and responsibilities. The great commandment of love, the ultimate law of God's reign, demands love of God and self, which cannot come to fruition apart from love of neighbor, and love of neighbor is a social endeavor. By proclaiming the reign of God and instituting a radical law of love, Jesus personified a fullness of life for all value system and ethics. This fullness of life unites love of God, neighbor, and self, and is lived with one's mind, heart, strength, with no restriction as to who is one's neighbor. In the Beatitudes, Jesus declared that the reign of God belongs to the poor and to those who work for justice and peace. Such justice demands unqualified commitment to the dignity and sacredness of every person. Such justice demands working for common good, honesty in one's dealing with neighbor and groups. It actively helps to create social structures that distribute fairly society's resources and promote the rights and responsibilities. It brings to every level, arena of life, a deep commitment to the full liberation of humankind and integrity with a special. And therefore, once again, Jesus declared, people will come from east and west, north and south, will eat in the kingdom of God. Jesus points out that the reign of God includes not only universality of God's love, but also universality of God's will for the salvation of all people. While in one sense the fullness is a future, when the whole universe will be gathered together and God will be all in all, in another sense, the fullness is already now, but at a trans-historical level. Therefore, fullness of life for all has its foundation in the fullness of God and has to be achieved and grown into, since fullness in life is not given. Life with its limitations, divisions, fragmentations, forced on individuals and society by abuse of freedom at all levels, demands a process of integration if growth towards the fullness of life for all is to be promoted. And that takes two levels, at the personal level and at the community level. The Christian community's range-centric ministry towards the fullness of life is also clearly manifested in the four mediation of science: service, communion, witness, and celebration. And therefore, it is time that we need to change the paradigm. Youth ministry from an ecclesiocentric to renew-centric ministry. Ecclesiocentric keeps the church as a center. And as we saw earlier, the church is not at the center. Church is at the service of the proclamation of the reign of God in every ministry. And therefore, the renew-centric ministry. And therefore, invitation towards a renew-centric youth ministry. Given a multi-faith, multicultural environment, youth ministry needs to shift its vision from a narrow perception of inside out. From the inside the church, you go out, proclaim. From outside the church, you bring in. To a wider, holistic perspective of fullness of life for all. It is only in this wider, holistic perspective that the church can become a sacrament of the reign of God for all people, especially for the youth. Sacrament of the reign of God is what Gaudium Spes says, Vatican document. Renew-centric youth ministry, founded on the fullness of life, lays emphasis on development of right relationship with one's own life, with others, with society, with the creation, and above all with the author of life and creation under whatever form one may understand and behave. Thus, fullness of life for all paradigm offers all young people, irrespective of their creed or religion, a future, a meaning, an identity, a sense of belonging, since these are the fundamental life earnings and exploration of young people. And therefore, what are the foundations of this renew-centric youth ministry? First of all, how do we look at the young? An anthropology of human person proposes that youth ministry perceive and cultivate youth as persons and promotes an abiding spirit of affirmation, appreciation, and celebration of life and human life. The first thing that we need to do in youth ministry is to affirm the young. Only when we affirm what is good in them, then they will begin to establish a relationship. Affirmation is appreciation and celebration of life. The second is the sacramental cosmology. Youth ministry is called upon to tap youth's attitude towards life in the world. This requires that youth animators personally cultivate a sacramental consciousness. What is that? A sense of the more in the midst, a spirit of contemplation towards life. This perspective implies that the youth animators encourage the young to look for meaning, for the more in the life, and to promote imagination, aesthetic gift, and to build up the ecological consciousness of being stewards of creation. The promotion of a community of persons, sociology, highlights the need of youth animators to be committed public servants who educate in ways that promote common good by fostering cooperation, partnership among learners. The appreciation of history, of legacy, of tradition invites all youth animators to evolve an educative agenda that is humanizing, available to all, and lays the intellectual, moral, aesthetic foundation needed for every vocation. This invites youth animators to grow as educated and cultured participants in life and demands a dual responsibility to conserve the most humanizing traditions and to draw new life from them. A wisdom epistemology invites youth animators to a deep passion for truth, to pursue it, to live it, to teach it. Their teaching should reflect commitment to the whole truth at the cognitive, relational, and moral level. A personal spirituality invites youth animators to care for their own personal spiritual life, to see their vocation as a spiritual one, which is enabling the young to live into the mystery and depths of life, to become fully alive to the glory of God. Living in a context where poverty, justice, oppression are prevalent, it becomes a fundamental task to invite youth animators to a personal passion for justice. This personal passion for justice is to be marked by right relationship with persons, with the environment, with all the contents in all one's teaching. And Catholicity invites youth animators to a universal consciousness and to strive to help the young to be leading learners by fostering in the young openness of mind and heart, by stimulating curiosity, and by helping them to prepare for a lifelong learning. And the fullness of the life is the goal. Just briefly, what are the objectives? Oh, no. Okay, time is going. I just finished. That is the goal. What? Sorry. It's a little. What are the objectives of this? How this goal is to be translated into objectives, and then lines of action. So we move from the fullness of life, objectives, elaboration of objectives in youth ministry, another paper by itself, but I shall just mention it. Educate by evangelize, evangelize by educating. And that means inviting the young towards a journey towards building up a personal identity within a culture. If you do not encourage the young to make them realize who they are within their culture, then the starting point is wrong. And then it becomes a journey towards fostering social order as a place of solidarity. A journey towards recognizing, moving towards the transcendent God perspective. And finally, a journey towards discerning one's life's choice. That is the ultimate object of enable the young to discern their life so that they become adults. They enter into adult life. Conclusion. The Federation of Asian Bishops' Conference, in its 7th General Assembly, identified youth as people to whom the Church in Asia needs specially to direct its mission of love and concern, and who are at the same time equally partners in that mission. Partners. Youth are the reality of today and not only the hope of tomorrow. They are a source of energy and vitality in society and in the church. At the same time, they are the most vulnerable and are victimized by structures of exploitation in the world. Youth of all backgrounds, urban, rural, poor, rich, educated, uneducated, employed, unemployed, the organized, unorganized, are all being tossed about by the waves of contemporary culture. Therefore, ministering to the young with the goal of empowering the young towards fullness of life implies life and love rather than being. Youth ministry encourages the young to realize the value of life and love. It is a dynamic and creative. Creation need not mean producing something, but just increasing the quality of life and our relationship. Given our limitation, a move towards fullness is a move towards authentic freedom through awareness, experience, transformation, and creation. Fullness then is not an immobility of a monistic self-sufficiency, but the participation in the fullness of life and communion that has its roots in the Trinity itself. By proclaiming the reign of God and instituting a radical law of love, Jesus personified fullness of life for all, value system and ethics. This fullness of life for all unites love of God, neighbor, and self. and is lived with all one's mind, heart, strength, and with no restriction as to who one's neighbor is. It is such a youth ministry the church in Asia is called upon to uphold and develop. Thank you, and God bless you.